Recording. Okay, let's just jump right in then since we've got
All right.
recording
Oh
going. And
man, you missed that really smart thing that I just said.
oh yeah, because you say so many smart things. Well, let me as we get started here, I will share my screen and then we will jump back into all the people that we have in the Zoom. Tonight's Industry Insights is about audio with your professors Charles Sutter and Amy Zimmitti, our dedicated audio instructor. Charles teaches a few things, but Amy, you pretty much concentrate on just audio, correct?
Yep, the digital audio production 1 and 2.
So that totals three for all of you wanting to keep track. Um, I am your host for the evening, TL Westgate. I went to Florida State University and I make films, and I am a professor here. And as we talked about, Amy Zimmitti, this is her background and things that she does. She's a visual artist, musician, activist, and has a lot of education behind her, so she knows her stuff, a lot of experience as well. And then there's Charles Sutter. Everybody knows Charles. He's got his MFA in 2015 from UCF, and he teaches mostly documentary production. That's kind of your forte here, right, Charles?
I guess.
That's French.
Yeah, it wasn't intentional. That's where we wound up, but we'll go with it.
Well, this is tonight's topics. I'm going to go through this, and we're not going to have this on screen the whole time. We want to see faces, but I just want to briefly run through how each of you started in specializing in audio, the different types of audio projects that you've worked on, the equipment that you use, and maybe not necessarily that you use, but that you would use in different situations as well. And how storytelling with sound is more important than people may think. So I really want to get into that. Including sound in your pre-production planning is important as well. The suspension of disbelief, and I think, Charles, you want to get into this, authenticity versus realism, hyperrealism, and surrealism, and what those words mean, all those letters in that order, what they mean. And of course, when you are working on your projects, you're going to have deliverables, the values of MP3 versus WAV. I know Amy's a big fan of MP3s.
Thumbs down, thumbs down. It's a good joke though.
And then getting into, getting work, having your own equipment, being able to be the person that crews go to say we need them on set because they are good at it, and finding sound recordist, designers, and mixers for your film. One last thing, just coming up, March is going to be producing and pre-production cinematography in April. And to keep track of all of these events, go to Linktree, but it's linktree.ee/DF events. So let's stop sharing the screen right there. And so now we can see everybody. And I'm going to kick it off. I'm not going to talk too much other than hosting, but I will say as a filmmaker, it's one of the major reasons a film is not accepted into a film festival, and I've talked to many film festival directors, this comes straight from them. The number one reason your film will be rejected is because of sound, which is kind of weird when you think of film as a visual medium. The most important thing is sound. You'd think it would be the image or the storytelling or cinematography, the acting. But no, if people can't understand what your actors are saying or the sound is bad, it's out the window. So that being said, we'll get to how important sound is. Let's start with Amy. How did you start in audio?
Let's see. It was back in the 1990s. As far as professionally, like my first gig was doing live sound. I was a visual artist and an artist in residence in Providence, Rhode Island, and it was called AS Art Space 220. And I started the job, and the funny conversations that we've had on Discord together, as you know, with the faculty and students. What were you getting paid? And I remember, Charlie saying he wasn't getting paid very much. Charlie Burkett on his first gig, doing camera, I think it was. I was getting paid $40 a night to mix audio. So that was my first gig, was $40 a night. So that it only went up from there, with game sound, working in a studio. My brother's a game developer, so I got kind of an easy door in there. And then eventually moving to Florida and working as a boom operator and a sound mixer. After that, working on the dub stage at Full Sail, and then getting into post-production. So just, letting you know that we can all start out at a very low daily rate. And I want to say it was 40, as in $40.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to have this job because it pays $50 a day.
Are they still hiring? 'Cause that sounds pretty good.
Back in the 1990s, I think the rate has gone up since then, but still, it was that was my start. When everyone's like, "Oh, I don't want to work for that little just to get started, just to get in your foot in the door, just do it,"
Well, there's a lot to be said for, getting any job, even if it's free, just to get your foot in the door and build yourself a reputation. And Charles has quite a reputation, but we won't talk about that. Instead, Charles, let's talk about your beginnings in audio.
So it was never something that I intended. Like when I got into film school, I wanted to be a writer, wanted to be a director. Eventually wound up that I needed to be a producer. But the thing you learn quickly is that sound is like the first thing that you can get hired to do and paid to do, because people that are good at it, it's not something that's common, right? Like it's not a thing that people specialize in, even though they should. So the first couple of movies that I worked on, I was like, oh, I could probably be an audio person. And you don't realize like there's a whole department of people that are working on, camera stuff, and everybody's in charge of like, but it's just you usually. Like you're usually mixing with the thing on your chest and you got the mic and it's just you by yourself. And if the audio sucks for the day, that day it's gone. It doesn't matter anymore, you're dead. So that was kind of that was my thing, was just being willing to try it. And it wound up where my best friend is a cinematographer, and we learned together. Like he was a cinematographer, his interest was always in camera. And to complement that, I sort of fell into doing sound and sound design. The thing that I will say, and we'll get into this more as we talk, is like a lot of the thing, just being willing to try will take you pretty far. But when you have access to people like Amy, and you actually know the like technical things that you're supposed to be doing, it saves you so much time. And really that's what the biggest thing is that it saves you time to be able to use somebody's expertise like that. Sorry, my dog.
And having your own equipment.
Hey, you'd be amazed what you can find in like Craigslist and eBay, like, a boom pole and like the H4n, or I guess now we're up to the H6n. Like that's a great place to start. Like, and then you could just go from there.
Yep. Much better than the days of tape, that's for sure.
The Nagras, that was my first. Yeah.
Yes.
So different types of audio projects. Who wants to tackle this subject first?
I'll jump in real quick, just because the span of my career has had so many different projects in audio, and this is mostly, to speak with students about, once you get a certain amount of skill, either with the camera or with sound, you can apply it to a lot of different jobs. And so if you have your own equipment and or if equipment is rented and you can operate it well, there's all different types of opportunities for you with sound. As we just mentioned a little earlier, I started out as a musician and then a live engineer, using live equipment to mix shows, both in corporate and live music, and then moved on into working in a recording studio. A lot of the concepts still apply. Things are different, and a lot of things are the same. Going into game sound and sound design was very close to when I eventually got into film sound after that. The only difference is that, with film, you're doing things on a timeline. In games, you're only doing things on a timeline if you're doing sound for cinematics. If you're doing sound for a game engine, you're organizing files really well, the same way you need to do in film is organize your files really well, but they're being put into a game engine. So, and they're being used differently. Music is composed or separated a little bit differently, but we still use stems in game audio as we do in film sound. So there's a lot of similarities if you pick up a skill that you can use for different types of projects in audio. Charles and I talked about music video production, which is a style of filmmaking that a lot of camera people and lighting people and art department people that are acting, also people that are producing and directing want to get into. And the audio person on set there still needs to do the job very well of playing back the sound, playing back the songs on cue and having it ready, and having something that's high enough quality that the artists, the musical artists, are inspired to sing to and put forth also that performance. So that when the real mix of the music is put onto the music video, it really, it really is immersive when people are watching it. So there's so many different projects that you can do on set as a recordist, boom operator, mixer, sound utility, and then also in post-production. In the large dub stages, we have someone dedicated just for dialogue, just for sound effects, just for music, and just for backgrounds, all working at the board together. So you can find a specialization, and you can have literally a lifetime career of trying different things if you start with the same principles in sound.
It's always kind of shocking to me that I'll talk to students and they'll say something like, I really want to be an editor. And then I'll ask them like what they know about sound design. And then they're like, oh, that's not really something that like I mess around with too much. But especially in like the independent world, anything that you don't know is going to cost you money. Like anything that you can't do for yourself is going to cost you a lot if you have to deal with a professional doing it. So to me, it makes sense because it changes the way you shoot. It changes the way you, sorry, my dog just ran inside. She's still a puppy.
Okay.
She bit through a lithium battery the other day and it exploded. That was a fun thing. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. So anything that you don't know as a filmmaker is going to wind up costing you money. Like when you have to hire someone to come onto your set to be your sound recordist, that's going to cost you a significant amount of money. That's a professional person, and getting sound done well, you have to pay for it, right? And it's always one of the first things that a production pays for, because bad sound, as TL said at the beginning, will kill your movie. Like it will literally, doesn't matter how good the visuals are, if you can't figure out the sound, no one's gonna wanna watch it. So anything that you don't know, anything that you can't have a foot in or a hand on or be able to know when it's gone wrong, those are blind spots for you as a filmmaker that are huge problems. Even when you're communicating with composers, or you're trying to figure out what song track to what soundtrack to use with your stuff, it's all a part of the same. You have to be interested, you have to have that like creative interest, or you're in trouble as a filmmaker and you don't even know it yet.
Yeah, Amy, you mentioned stems, and for those who don't know it, that's the bottom part of a flower, right?
It sure is.
Okay.
That's about it.
The thing on a bicycle tire that you put the air into, right? That's what.
Oh, those aren't nubs?
It's like when we get into deliverables, when we get into deliverables, and when we're talking about sound, and we also talk about localization, putting your film into different languages so that it can be broadcast and or screened or on a network television station and to be played in different countries, or in your same country for people speaking different languages. Same thing goes for games. I mean, you've got to be able to put the subtitles on, off, and same thing with the closed captions and so on, in different languages. And so you've got to be able to separate the dialogue from your film from the music and effects. And so all of your room tones and some of your most realistic backgrounds are in your dialogue tracks, but you've got to be able to separate those into stems, your dialogue separate from your music and effects, so that it can be dubbed over in a different language. That's mainly the reason that we do that. Very important, especially now.
That's a painful lesson to learn when you don't know it going into like that part of the project.
Yeah.
The audio should be on different tracks?
Yes.
Okay,
but not one piece of audio for its own track, because I've seen that a lot, and that's something that when people first get into sound design, they just put one sound on each track, and you got to scroll like crazy. You don't want to do that. You want to put like things in the same categories on the same tracks together so that they can be filtered the same way and so on. And be efficient about your track count.
So Christopher Bonnell has a comment that he was agreeing with what you were saying, Amy. He has a friend who's a great help. He outsourced a lot of sounds from YouTube. So I just want to point out, while we're talking, if anybody has a question, click that raise hand button and we'll get to you. We can take a pause and field your questions as they come up. Don't save them all for the end. I feel like a YouTuber. Hit that like, smash that button.
Tell your friends.
In your question there about YouTube, as long as you're outsourcing or you're downloading sounds from YouTube that are in a WAV file format, that was one of the points, the bullet points that we had on TL's awesome slide there, is that you really only want to use compressed audio files as temp files. This usually goes for music when a producer or director is trying to communicate to the composer as someone that's hired to do the sound for your film, is that you might use a scratch track or an MP3 file just to kind of give it to the composer so that they have an idea of what you want them to make for your film. But you really don't want to be putting MP3s and compressed files into a film timeline. We do that for games when audio files have to be made into very small file sizes for mobile games. I mean on handheld, not necessarily for apps, but but also for handheld games where we've got to do really small file sizes for audio files. And there's different file types that game engines can handle for that. But on a film timeline that's going to be played back in real time in a theater or on a television network, you only want to be using uncompressed WAV files. And so if you're going to be outsourcing or downloading from YouTube or anywhere online, you want to make sure that you're checking that file type. And you can do that by importing it into Audition. It'll tell you what type of file type that is. What we've been telling students to do is to go to the Pro Sound Effects Library. That is a wonderful resource that all of our students have. It's not something that's free it's not free to the public. It's not free for everyone. It's free for you, or it's part of your tuition. It's built into your tuition fees that you have full access to it. And so as long as you're logged into your school account, you can get on the Pro Sound Effects Library and start downloading not only sound files, sound effects and backgrounds, but lots of music and music stem files. And they'll give you the choice between the MP3 and the WAV file, and you should always be going for WAV files for things that are going to stay on your timeline, that you're actually going to print. We use that as an old term, print, for your final mixes, things that are actually going to be shown in the theater.
Okay, so Charles, what type of equipment do you use?
It depends. I mean, with documentaries, there's like a philosophical element to it. Depending, like there are different modes of documentary filmmaking, and depending on the mode, you might say, if you're a documentary filmmaker of a particular kind of mode, well, I only have one ear, right? Like I only have my ears where they are now. So I'm not going to put lavalier mics on everyone, because that's not the way I would record the sound naturally if I was in an environment naturally. Like that's cinema verite. But that doesn't produce the best sound, right? Like that's not going to be what sounds great. Like it's a philosophical choice that you can definitely make, but it's not necessarily something that is ultimately going to be helpful to you as a just starting out filmmaker. So for me, I always have in my audio kit, I always have a boom mic. What do I have at the moment? I have an M60 at the moment. And then I have two lavs at least, depending on, I like to know what my day is going to be like. I like to know who I'm going to talk to, if it's going to be like run and gun or whatever. But that's where it starts. And then I'll use the H6 to record while I made a whole documentary like out of a backpack while I was going through Europe. We had like almost nothing. We had one tripod, two cameras, and then like an audio setup, and like that was enough to make a movie that showed at a bunch of film festivals. It's all about it's kind of like what Amy said. Like you have to know a little bit, the basics, and then you spend the rest of your life kind of refining and applying that and figuring out how to use it. Like once you master that little bit of machinery, you can keep applying those lessons to bigger and better, equipment, and spend the rest of your paychecks on getting better gear all the time.
Charles, when you said run and gun, the run and gun setup is the awesome setup that Charles is referring to. Is like when you're basically running, and we call the gun is like the shotgun mic.
Yep.
Because you got they call it a pistol grip. It goes in the pistol grip. You're holding it in your hand. You might have a boom pole, but often the pistol grip that I like to use isn't actually a shock mount. It's a handle made by Rycote that you put your shotgun microphone in, and you can spin it off the boom pole, collapse the boom pole, throw it in your backpack, just like Charles is saying, and then you've got you've got the shotgun mic in your hand and you're like running with it and you're using your arm as the boom pole, because especially if you're doing like the walk and talk in the DFM 220 sound class, is trying to practice on moving with the microphone and catching sound in motion. So that's when Charles is saying run and gun, exactly what you're doing. You're like running with the equipment and capturing sound on the move. And
100%,
trying to do the best you can.
And you need
It's so fun.
you need to be set up in 5 minutes. Like you
do.
It
The faster, the better.
It isn't like, this isn't the most ideal situation. Like, tough, this is what you got, go for it. Like, you still need to produce the correct sound, or you still need to get something that's usable out of this situation that you have. I find that like a lot of times film students are like orchids. They're like, everything has to be right for them to bloom. Like, it's got to, like, the shot has to be perfect. Like, we have to spend 3 hours lighting it and whatever. And like, that's just not the reality of a professional work environment most of the time. Like, you do need to practice so that you can hit something perfectly, but then you need to take that and multiply your speed by 100, because that's what people are going to expect of you on set.
Jump into the fire. Jump into the fire. Especially with documentary sound. Documentary sound is the most fun out of any genre of sound I've had ever. So it's still my favorite.
Did you want to add any more to the equipment discussion, Amy?
For the run and gun setup, that's still my favorite. It's the same for field recording. I started out originally with a little 3-channel mixer, but that audio was going straight into camera, which is never beneficial because you can't monitor your audio on the camera because the camera person is closest to that monitoring system. So I moved on from that very quickly to 2 and 4 channel. I was using sound devices when I was working in Florida, and then moved to Zoom when I moved to California. And so a small, 2, 3, or 4 channel recorder. The H6 that everybody has now is excellent because it's 4 channels with the 2 field recording mics on top, and the AB, the XY axis on the top. And so you can do nice stereo recordings. You can do nice individual mono channel recordings with your shotgun mic and with lavaliers. And then also, I just wanted to point out, because I know Charles has done this too with the lavaliers, is you can always plant the lavalier microphone in a place in a scene that's not picking up enough sound or that you can't reach with the boom pole. So you can always use a lav and just set it on the table and have it connected to your recording device, and it doesn't always have to be on an actor. You can set it in if you're recording inside a vehicle, for instance. And the camera's pointing inside the vehicle. You can always, do things like tape the microphones, whether it's a shotgun or the lavalier, inside the car, and so on. I remember in a run and gun situation, I had taped a shotgun inside a phone booth really, really fast, and then we had to get out of there and run to the next thing. So it's that's all for the field recording setups. All of those work really well, whether you're on set or you're doing a run and gun documentary setup. There's obviously the bigger setups that are the carts and things like that, but I've never found those to be 100% necessary, even for the drama films and different genre films that were in sound stages or in homes and buildings like that. I've always been able to get by with the same 4-channel run and gun setup. So,
I completely agree.
Yeah.
The one thing I was going to mention, though, just as like a pro tip, if you are using more than one microphone on a set, like on a setup, you have a boom and you have lavs, be sure that you grab individual room tones with each of them. And throughout the day, like, you may be lulled into a false sense of security, like, oh, I got room tone and I had all 3 mics on at the same time. Okay, but also get it off of each mic, because when you go back and you're trying to mix those dialogue tracks, that stuff is going to save you. Again, learn from my tears, learn from my crying and my looking at my computer, just questioning life in general. The pain that I have learned. Be sure that, and do it throughout the day. Like, get it in the morning before everyone shows up, get it at lunch, and then get it in the evening, because it's do throughout. More room tone, the better.
Well, especially because, I remember I used to live in Florida before moving to California, and the frogs and the creepy crawlies and the chirpities come out. There's night birds. I mean, the sound of the evening, even if you're shooting inside and you don't even see outside in your shot and you're throwing light in the window artificially to make it look like it's daylight, if you're still shooting into the night, the background just sounds different. Put those headphones on with that microscope for sound with the microphone connected, and you're going to sound different in the nighttime than in the daytime. And you exactly, Charles, what Charles is saying, capture that room tone throughout the day, so that you have a sample of it when you need to start, editing things later.
You don't want to be in a place where you're like, you've got this like great piece of dialogue, and then right in the middle of it, like the air conditioner kicks on or something.
Exactly. The refrigerator, so many things. Someone flushes a toilet. I mean, all those things you can hear. Even a computer hard drive spinning, you can hear. So
You will literally lose sleep over that shit for like for days. If it's the one thing in your feature film that you're like, I can't fix it. And then when you listen to it at a festival or something like that, you'll die inside a little bit as you hear it. Nobody else might have heard it, but you did, and you can't stand it.
Yep. That's a great story, Charles. Speaking of stories,
it's happened to all of us. It happens.
well, that's a very smooth segue into our storytelling with sound segment. See what I did there?
Yeah, I like it.
So yeah, storytelling with sound. What is that? Tell us about that, Amy.
Well, I have to attribute Joseph Byron, who was the original film dean of the Los Angeles Film School, and he recently retired last Friday, and we had a big, gathering on Zoom, to collect all the memories together that we all had, so inspired by Joseph Byron, and I had really only come to understand in filmmaking, also in game development as well, is that with having when people say the phrase, half of the movie is sound and half of it is picture, and everything that Charles has said about, you can spend all this time with picture and lighting and everything with the acting, the art department and everything, and then if the sound, isn't there, you've got to start from scratch, and who knows where you're going to begin. When we talk about sound and storytelling, it was Joseph Byron when I came to Hollywood, after working in Florida for a long time and focusing on the skill and proficiency of recording sound in a minimalist way, not using effects, just recording film sound as well as I could with as quiet a background as possible, and doing all the things that Charles has said, collecting room tone and making sure there's not a lot of background noise when you're capturing the story, which is the dialogue. But talking about storytelling with sound, and then talking about sound design elements and also music elements, there are such things as character motifs that you may know in movies that you've watched, where a particular character has either a song element, a melody element that it's used for its character development, or also a sound design that follows a particular character. So, and this also, as you know, happens in games. With those of you that also play games and watch a lot of films, you know that there's sometimes a sound that kind of reminds you or gives you the idea that a character is about to appear in the scene, before you even see or come in contact with that character. So there's a lot of really special, amazing things that you can do thematically with both sound design and music that can really do much for character development. And I learned that very much once I got to California, and I started not only implementing that in projects that I was working on, but also helping students to understand that this is a whole other, in some ways, uncharted area that just takes some brainstorming. And once you start thinking about it, you can really start to implement this into your films, and not doing things necessarily the easy way, but doing things the interesting way.
100%.
On a budget, and you can do this on a budget too.
It's like when you first learn about screenwriting, right? Like your impulse is to come up with these characters that say like really clever or really funny things, and like that might work, right? Like that might work in a scene to have these two characters going back and forth saying snappy stuff. But the professional writing, the more interesting writing, is when you learn how to layer in tension. And like sonic landscapes, when done correctly, they affect you, they present drama and tension to you without you even understanding on a conscious level that that's what's happening. Like there are like audio cues. The Lord of the Rings, you hear each one of the different rings has a different audio cue. It has different music scores. And that's that's the big thing that you should notice, is that they have these, was it James Horner, I think, did the score for that? You notice it. You're meant to notice it. But there's also, each different ring has a sound that accompanies it that's more heavy and whooshy, if it's the one ring, or if it's one, one of the rings of humans, it's got a more fiery sound. Those are things that are layered in there, that they hit people on that like subconscious level, that make all the difference between something being good and something being great. And more importantly, like your movie having an intentionality to it that separates you from being amateur person that plays around with movies to person that is going to get work going forward and going to have a career in this.
Well put. I like that. Let's move on.
Put some thought into it.
Yeah, we hopefully we're about halfway there, because we're about halfway done with time. So the next subject is including sound in pre-production. That's not important at all, right?
You fix it in post.
Oh, okay. Well, what should you be doing in pre-pro for sound-wise?
I mean, you should always have your sound person with you when you location scout. Like that's
absolutely.
I mean, the cinematographer is going to be like, "This is great." And it's a room full of like metal, so everything sounds like, it sounds like lightning strikes every time anyone takes a footstep. That's not going to work for sound, and that's not something that the cinematographer is necessarily going to pay attention to. But you also should be paying attention to specific equipment requirements. If there's a camera move that's going to prohibit the use of a boom in like a long hallway or something, whatever the case may be, you need to account for that in pre-production to save yourself a headache when you're on set. Like these are things that cost you time, and that's especially in the world that I live in with the independent filmmaking. Time is never something that you have enough of. And so the place that you can eliminate some of those like redundancies on set, like how do we figure this thing out on set, is to think about it in pre-production. That's kind of what I was saying before about how you need to know a little bit about everything. You need to know at least that if I'm going to do this crazy camera movement in this hallway, we have to come up with something else for the sound to do. Like we have to figure out a way to make the sound work. So those are like some of the like producery elements of thinking about sound. But I think Amy has other things to talk about, specifically like with script and like developing.
Oh yeah, like planning a script. Absolutely. Yeah. You know how each department has a different color. There's props, there's stunts, there's the different aspects of the art department, lighting, all the different colors. Like when we used to draw on scripts, we used to use actual colored pencils. And for sound, the color is a brown pencil. And so absolutely, if you have your script and you are hiring or thinking about not only the who might be the sound designer or someone that might be writing some music for you after it's the film is shot and edited and ready to go into post-production, but also with the sound people that will be coming onto set with you, it's good for them to be aware of the script, send them the script, give them the opportunity to line the script. They might see things in the script that say, in the opening scene, there's a close-up of a faucet dripping. There is wind in the trees and an establishing shot before it gets to the story and the dialogue comes in. Things like that would be underlined by a sound mixer going into a shoot, and also definitely being invited to the location scouts, so that maybe the sound engineer can get there before the shoot happens or stay later or go there on a different day to sample room tones when people aren't around, get things outside, actually turn the faucet on and get an authentic faucet instead of just snagging it from the library. People that are, filmmakers with intention that really want to have things very authentic, people that tend to do real stunts instead of all CGI, or, are the same people that might record, take a really long time and with intent, and make sure that things are getting recorded that are authentic instead of just snagging them from a library. So, give the sound people an opportunity to know what's happening. If there's like a rain machine, coming down on a window and it's going to make kinds of noise. You're in Pirates of the Caribbean, you've got a rocking boat, probably gonna, have to record that as ADR, all kinds of things like that. But knowing the script in advance and giving the sound people the opportunity to put their color in there and underlined things that are sound notes, helps prepare. And then there's also something that's kind of like a stage plot that we've looked at also. When people are really preparing well for doing their shot lists and things like that, and preparing the day just to make sure that things move very quickly on a smaller budget. You see sometimes something that's like a top-down view of what the shots are kind of in advance you're going for, as a director or as a cinematographer, even though they might change and they might get tweaked right in the moment when you're actually doing them. This way you can see which directions the lights might be pointing, so that the boom operator, and even more so if there's a mixing cart and more equipment that needs to be kind of moved around and kind of keep it out of the way so the actors and the director can do their thing. This way the sound people can know to stand opposite the lights so that there's the least possible chance there'll be a boom shadow. And why sometimes you'll see a boom operator with sunglasses on set, because the lights are constantly in your face all day long. So
that's everyone's favorite move, right? It's to yell at the sound person for not knowing where the camera's going to be, and it's because no one told them.
Yeah.
You just figure out where you're supposed to be in the shot, and that's yeah. You weren't included in blocking. Yeah. No,
you forgot to mention sunglasses in the equipment discussion, but
This is true. Always have the sunglasses with you. I mean, I have to have them. It's blinding on set because you're, as a boom operator, the lights are constantly shining right at you because you've got to be opposite it to keep the boom shadow out.
Well, one of the words you dropped in that dialogue was authenticity. So let's talk about authenticity versus all of the realisms. That would be realism, hyperrealism, and surrealism. What are the differences? What are you talking about here?
Well, Charles, you talk about authenticity first, because this was a great conversation we had recently.
It's because I'm OCD about this. Amy was nice enough to help me out with a sound design. I was having a headache. I couldn't figure out how to get the sound out of this old recording, old radio recording. I was making a documentary about a World War II boat, and I had this Tokyo Road recording that was authentic to the moment, and I could not figure out how to get this sound out of it. And this is like Amy's world, and I begged, and she was nice enough to help me. But the other thing that she noticed was that, like I said, I have OCD about being sure that all of the gun sound effects were exactly the correct guns to be used that they used on the ship. It was as close as I could possibly make it. I wanted to be as authentic a sound design as I could. And the difference between authenticity is like when you record the thing as it actually happened. So an authentic gun would be something that was on the ship, but that would be the gun itself that was on this destroyer. Realistic would be that gun recorded someplace else. It's the same gun, it sounds correct to the audience, but it's not authentic. It's not an original sound to that particular moment. So as a documentarian, you wind up chasing your neuroses a lot of the time, especially when you're working in sound design, because the door didn't sound right, recorded, even though it's the right door from the moment, it doesn't sound enough like a door, so you have to make it sound more like a door to make it realistic. Those are the kind of questions that you wind up asking yourself all the time as you stare at your movie for the 800th viewing of it. But so you wind up with these questions a lot, right? In documentaries, it's important that the audience have a sense that this is like an actual thing that happened. It's nonfiction. In narrative movies, none of us here have been on the space station, right? So we don't know what it actually sounds like in space. We don't know what dinosaurs sound like, right? We don't know what Jurassic Park would have sounded like, but we have to create a soundscape and a sound universe that the audience won't be distracted by. It has to sound realistic enough that the audience can go like, wow, that might be what it sounds like. But at the same time, it can't be so overwhelming and so forefronted in the audience's mind that it takes them away from watching the movie and they go like, oh, wow, that's too much what a thing sounds like. Have you ever been next to a lion when it roars? Occasionally that happens at the zoo. It's bone jarring. Like it is like the reptilian part of your brain goes into shock about it. And that wouldn't work in a movie, right? Like that kind of a lion's roar wouldn't work in a movie. So you have to do something similar, but not all the way there. So yeah, those are all of my simplified ways of talking about realism, surrealism, authenticity, and hyperrealism.
Charles,
Amy?
I think the worst sound that I have heard in a documentary film or any film for that matter is a car door is worse, I feel, than even a door that's in a home or a building. I feel like when it doesn't sound anything like what you want it to be. It's always too loud.
Yeah,
And you can never keep it. Every
and
car open and close, like close, every car close
it,
sound
it
cannot be used.
registers too low. It always
Yeah,
registers too low. It always goes that. It never
it never
works where you
sounds
need it.
right.
No.
Anytime someone sits on a couch or a bed, it just goes. And it's you don't hear that, you don't want to hear that.
Yep.
And so all of those things either need to be kind of slightly filtered out, and or ones taken that from a library that sound authentic, or doing recordings on your own, doing Foley on your own and things that sound authentic, even though you're working outside the realm of what was the original production audio, right?
Don't let the desire or the journey to find like authenticity and realism to take away from you're still a creative person. Like if you're doing this, if you're here listening to us talk about sound design, you're a creative person. Like you still have to apply the same amount of creativity that you would to your shot selection as you do your sound selection. It's like it's the same process. The only difference is which sense you're appealing to. And so these are just the ways that we talk about the sound effects that you might be using and the classifications of them.
Yeah, I'm friends with Bob Asman, who is he won an Oscar for one of Clint Eastwood's films, sound design. And I asked him once, I was like, so how do they make the noise when people are handling guns? How do you do that? And he said, we take a gun and we loosen all the screws and just rattle it around. Because in real life, if you were to move a gun like this, it doesn't make any noise. And especially if it's a 9mm, it doesn't make the revolver revolving sound. So the audience enjoys that ear melting buttery.
Got to make it believable. That's the suspension of disbelief. It doesn't have to be like I've used a wine opener, the ones that have the arms that swing out for a gun handling sound, and then just use a little bit of a tweak on a pitch tweaking on it, and that worked. But all these different things, people use gloves to make bird flapping sounds. I've used hangers to make it sound like you're throwing a fish line out. I mean, all of these things are going for realism, but you're using something that's different, and that's what what Foley is about, and why all that is so much fun. Now the difference in sound design approach, where we start with realism in documentary filmmaking, like what most of what I've done filmmaking wise has been documentary filmmaking, and same with Charles. But when we get into hyperrealism with action films, right, things that are supposed to be sound designed with intent to be larger than life, and then when we move also over into surrealism, where we've got science fiction and fantasy. And I've been really impressed with seeing that it's the fewest number of student works that I have, really the honor of watching and grading in the DFM 315 class and in the sound class, after the students have directed and edited, that that are actually a surrealist films, students that are really going for it and trying to create something that is in that realm of science fiction and fantasy. How cool is that? And so these are all different approaches to sound design. In the science fiction and fantasy, you're using sound design to make it believable with the suspension of disbelief that you're in an entirely other place that does otherwise does not exist on the Earth, but might exist at, on a space station, which TL and I have both been on. So, right, absolutely. So
I'm so jealous.
It was
right?
fun.
Yeah.
We had fun, didn't we, Amy?
We had such a good time.
So much vomit, though. It was amazing. Anyway, you already kind of discussed MP3 versus WAV. But under our deliverables, there's also picture lock, time code, video formats. You want to touch upon that real briefly? Then we got 2 more subjects before we wrap it up.
Dun, dun, dun.
With the time codes, we just want to make sure that you have SMPTE time code on your film when it's going through the audio post-production process. Once you've picture locked your film and you've solidified an edit that you want to take to the next level and do the maybe correcting the dialogue, taking takes of different dialogue and maybe doing some automated dialogue replacement and replacing some of the dialogue, doing some Foley, performing some sound effects, adding some sound design from libraries in your field recorder, bringing in some music from a composer or a library. You want to make sure that you have the time code burned onto at least an overlay so that you have that checkbox checked when you're exporting out of Premiere, so that when you bring it into Audition and you start spotting your film, this is the communication between the director and the sound designer, anybody that's going to be working on the sound team. You want to have the time code running on it for that time period, and you also want to be having your film in a lesser quality. It doesn't have to be high quality when it's put into Audition to do the sound design and the sound editing. This way you have a time locator where on spotting sheets people can talk together and say exactly at this hours, minutes, seconds, and frames location is where we're going to start this music, we're going to fix this dialogue, we're going to rewind the timeline so that this actor can record this dialogue line in here. And so it's a location, it's a time code locator for everybody's communication. So that's why you got to make sure that you can put that time code on there. Then you'll obviously take the time code off and you'll bring your film back to a higher resolution when you print. We call it print again. Bring your final audio mix, marry it back to your film again so that it can be screened and broadcast and sent off to festivals and things like that.
Yeah, that becomes vitally important. I remember the behind the scenes for the Lord of the Rings. Charles, you mentioned the composer's name, Howard. What is it?
I think it was it Horn?
Oh, James Horner.
I think it was James Horner.
The composer was really upset with Peter Jackson because they had a action scene and Peter Jackson went in and like trimmed 1 or 2 frames, and it totally anchored the composer. Exactly. So having that time code, it's down to the frame. It's that precise. So with all of the
more money, charge more money. That's all you gotta do.
Speaking of money, another good segue here. After our students have learned all there is to learn from you two, getting work, having your own equipment is pretty important, and getting your own work. Tell us about that.
It was Howard Shore. You're right.
Howard Shore.
I think Amy was right when she hinted at this before. Like, get your own gear. Like that, the surest way to get work as a sound designer is to say, you can hire me, and I already have my own boom pole and my own mic and my own, H6N or whatever. It's also important. I mean, you have it in your kit, so you should be playing with it anyway. But in the same way that you'd pull your camera out and just go, shoot a kid's birthday party, like do the same thing with the H6. Like take it out, put the mic on it, and see what it sounds like. Like don't wait until you're in a high leverage situation where you have to hit it out of the park on a set. Like take it to take it to a park and see what the distances are that it works at. Like you can read the stuff that's in the manual, but maybe I'm just a tactile learner, but for me it didn't make sense until I actually started like goofing around with the sound equipment and actually seeing what it does.
So what you're recommending is that for the next family gathering, our students should be the one weirdo who's got a boom pole over the kid's birthday party.
Absolutely.
Don't explain yourself. Don't tell them what it is, because then they'll act differently. Just do it.
And also always look behind you. You don't want to clock somebody in the forehead or hit one of your family members freshly painted wall with a smudge. It's about being graceful. But the same thing, like your equipment, just like a camera, the more you use your camera, it's like an extension of your arms and your eyes, and you're looking, the way you look at things, you're thinking about how you're looking through the camera. It's the same thing. The more that you put the headphones on, you listen to the microphone as a microscope for sound, and you turn your head and you start to listen to all the different directionality of sound and the directionality of your microphone when it's picking up sound. And you live in that world, and it becomes an extension of your own senses, and then you're able to work faster. Just like we said, you've got to be able to set up and break down quick. You've got to be efficient. You've got to constantly keep your cables wrapped, and so that people don't trip over your stuff. And the more that you do this, and you use the equipment and in a hands-on way,
your shoulder strength up to carry.
Yes, exactly. Your shoulders will strengthen up. Your posture will be better. You'll get more in with with imagining the boom pole is floating over you so it doesn't weigh anything. You know,
You gotta
all of the
get
above.
used to the ear sweat from the
Yes.
the ear enclosure. That's a real
Yes.
thing that bothers you a lot the first
Yes.
couple days.
Same.
Okay, well, we've got just a few more minutes to wrap up here with finding sound recordists, designers, and mixers for your films. Obviously, not everybody can do all the jobs, so if you can farm it out, that's better, right?
Oof.
Using specialists, how do you find these people?
These are your people, Amy. I'll let you talk.
Well, I'm actually recommending that, you know, with the education that you have through this degree program and practicing, if you're practicing with your own films doing the sound, I believe that you should train the first person that you think either has an aptitude for it, has an interest in it. If you're a director or a cinematographer looking for someone to support you as the sound person for your films, um, you should enlist somebody that that you believe in, you're already working with, because what you'll find, the more film crews that you work on, is that a lot of them overlap, and a lot of this doesn't even just mean that you're in the union or you're work for hire. It means that directors, especially independent and all the way up through as commercial as you can get, will hire a lot of the same people in a lot of the same departments, and sound is included in that. Once you find somebody that you like the way the workflow, you know, is synergistic together, I think committing to having somebody work for you and training them and you know, supporting them and offering them resources is really the best way to go. Investing in them, and then also, if from the sound professional standpoint, as far as accumulating equipment, also don't try to just be the only sound person. It's not a competition. You also want to have people, at least two other people. If you get a larger gig doing sound, you're going to need someone to maybe even two people to support you on that sound team that you work really well with. And also, if you need to take a day off of a shoot, you want to be able to trust that you can hand your gig to someone for that day, that they understand how to use your gear, and that you can you know, fully trust them to be you for that full day, because that stuff does happen also.
Any last words, Charles?
I've enjoyed our time together, TL.
Well, you and I can stay on the Zoom. Well, I guess that's going to wrap it up for audio. But audio.
That's it. Thumbs up, TL. Thank you, everyone.
Come back next month for post or pre-production. It's next month is producing and pre-production.
Definitely, if anybody has anything that we didn't talk about that you guys are interested in, or if anybody's watching this later because they couldn't make it because life happens, I totally understand. Definitely don't be afraid to reach out. Amy and I have talked about this before. We're always looking to develop the next generation of sound people. Like,
Absolutely.
That's why we do what we do. Don't be afraid to reach out to us. We're more than happy. If anybody's interested in doing sound things, we will make the time for you.
You can contact them directly, or better yet, there's an audio Discord channel on the LAFS student server.
There sure is. There sure is.
There you go.
Just make sure you tag me, because if you don't, I'll never see it. I would like to pretend that I'm better.
There's a lot of channels on there. It's a lot of channels.
I barely have a face. I have a Facebook that my wife made me.
Thank you, Marvin.
Anyway. Yeah, just say hi and whatever. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you guys are welcome. Students, Casey, you're welcome. We had a good time, and we'll see you soon.
Take care. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.